I'm Pam Dyson, and I'm with the St. Louis Center for Play Therapy Training. Here today in my play therapy room with another play therapy tip. I'm going to bet that if you use play therapy strategies in your work with children, teenagers, and families, that you probably have in your playroom or in your play therapy kit some little miniature animals. So this technique today that I'm going to introduce you to will utilize some of those animals. I have some representative animals here on this tray. I've got some farm animals, wild animals, animals you might find at the zoo, fish, birds, reptiles, a real assortment of animals. And how you can use this is put these animals out on a tray, on a table, whatever works best. You can use this one-on-one with a child. I like to use this particular technique with families or in a group setting. It's a great way to assess the dynamics of the family or the group. It's also a great way for them to kind of be able to look at their ways of communicating and their ways of problem solving. So the way I would preface this, let's say for example, I'm working with a family. We've got 2 parents and 2 children, and a 3rd child is not present for this family session. I would put out these animals, ask them to take some time looking at them, talking about them, and then each family member would select an animal that they have something in common with, characteristics that are similar, traits that are similar. Use whatever words the youngest members in the family are going to be able to understand what it is that you want them to do. It's not simply an animal that they like, but an animal that they have something in common with. So for example, here's a penguin. It's a parent with a child penguin, and so you might have a mother, for example, that would select this one because that's how she sees herself, as someone taking care of her children. Perhaps the father says, well, I'm kind of like a tiger because I'm kind of in charge of things, and sometimes when I'm grumpy I growl a little bit. And the youngest member of the family might select a kitten as themselves, and perhaps the other child in the family might say, well, you know, everybody says I'm kind of hyper and I can't sit still, so I'm kind of like a frog. So this particular family will have selected these animals to represent themselves, and they would share with one another why they picked those animals. They would have an opportunity to ask one another more questions about that animal, like why did you pick that one, and why didn't you pick this one? I think maybe this is the animal that is more like you. But each individual person gets to decide which is the animal that represents them. I mentioned that one of the family members in our hypothetical group isn't present, so we would talk about, if they were here, what animal would they select to represent themselves, or what animal might you all pick that would represent them? So let's say that they picked the zebra. And we would talk then about, if these animals lived together as a family, what would it look like? And so then they'll start talking about things about who would be in charge, or maybe 2 particular animals would argue a lot. Maybe some animals would align with one another and some would be farther away from one another. I frequently have had parents tell me after I facilitated this particular activity with them that the way these animal dynamics played out was very representative of how things really were in their family. So it is very symbolic as to how they see themselves and how their family dynamics are structured. And then I might give them a hypothetical problem, and we would talk about, if those animals were family and they had to solve that problem, how would they go about solving that particular problem? We might also talk about, is there an animal in here that you would never be? Or do you think as you got older, children or even adults, that you might change and become a different animal? Or if this is the one that you are, is that what you want to be? Or would you see yourself as maybe being a different animal? So I've used it with families, I've used it with groups, and I've used it individually with children as well, where they select one animal to represent themselves and then other animals to represent other members of their family. It's a fun little activity. It's easy to do. Just get a few animals and put them all together, and you can use this animal projection activity.